Welcome to The Explainer. You know, in the world of law, timing is, well, it's everything. If you miss a deadline, you could lose your right to justice, just like that. But what if a betrayal is so deep, or the victim is so vulnerable, that the clock should never even start ticking? Today, we're diving into the really surprising exceptions in India's Limitation Act, the places where, for some wrongs, time is no defense at all.
So, let's just kick things off with a big question. Imagine something terrible happened decades ago. Is there a point where the law just throws up its hands and says, sorry, you're just out of time? For most things, yeah, absolutely. But, and this is a huge but, not for everything.
So you've got this law, the Limitations Act, and you can think of it like a giant ticking clock on every single legal claim. It's there to make sure things have an endpoint. But it also has these incredible exceptions built right in, specifically designed to protect vulnerable people and to punish the most serious breaches of faith. Let's start with the most absolute exception of them all.
Okay, our first stop is Section 10. This is all about one of the most sacred duties there is, both in law and in life, the duty of a trustee. When you entrust someone with property for a very specific reason, the law holds that person to the highest possible standard.
Now, this is super important. This powerful exception doesn't apply to just any old trust. No, it's reserved for what's called a trust with a specific purpose. That means the goal is crystal clear, totally unmistakable. For example, if money is given to someone for one thing and one thing only, say a child's education, that's a specific purpose. There's no ambiguity.
And here's where it gets really powerful. When a trustee in one of these specific trusts abuses that trust, let's say they take that education money and buy a fancy car for themselves, the law brings down the hammer. There is no time limit. None. You can sue them. The clock literally never even starts ticking.
I mean, check out this example. A manager of a religious endowment, basically a temple priest, uses donation money to buy himself a new SUV while the temple roof is literally crumbling. The person who replaces him can sue him, even if it's 20, 30, or 40 years later. So the key takeaway here is, for these sacred, specific trusts, the protection against betrayal is absolute.
Okay, so that covers one kind of betrayal, but the law also has to figure out how to protect groups of people who might be vulnerable. So what happens when an entire family needs to sue someone, but some of them can't legally do it, like their kids or they're mentally incapacitated? Well, that's the puzzle of Section 7.
The whole answer hinges on this one legal idea: valid discharge. I know, it sounds a bit like jargon, right? But all it really means is asking a simple question. Is there at least one person in the group who has the legal power to settle the case for everybody else?
You see, the logic here is really about being fair to the defendant, too. If there's one capable person, like a father managing the family's property, who can legally act for everyone, then the clock starts ticking. The defendant shouldn't have to wait forever. But if no one in the group can legally act, the law slams on the brakes. The clock is paused, protecting the rights of the vulnerable until someone is finally able to stand up and fight for them.
But just when you think you've got it all figured out, the law throws in a twist. Even these really powerful protections for people with disabilities have their own limits. The law is always trying to find that perfect balance between being fair and just getting things settled. And that's where Section 8 comes into play.
Section 8 is fascinating because it creates exceptions to the exceptions we just talked about. It's the law drawing a line in the sand to make sure cases don't just stay open forever and ever. And there are two really key limits here.
First up is something called the right of preemption. It's an old right, basically giving you first dibs on buying your neighbor's property if they decide to sell. The law says for this specific right, your disability doesn't pause the clock. Why? Probably because property deals need to happen quickly and with certainty. So the clock starts ticking right away, whether you're a minor or not.
Second, and this one can be a little tricky, there's a cap. So once a person's disability ends, let's say they turn 18, the law gives them a fresh window of time to file their lawsuit. But that new window is generally capped at 3 years. So, even if they only had 2 years left on the original clock, the law is generous and bumps it up to 3.
However, and this is the absolute key, you've got to get this, you always get whichever period is longer. It's a safety net, not a ceiling. So if you had 7 years left on the clock when you were a minor, you still get all 7 of those years after you turn 18. The law won't cut you short. You get the benefit of the better deal.
All right, for our last point, let's zoom out and go global. We live in a world where contracts and business deals cross borders all the time. So, if a deal that was made in London goes bad and you want to sue in Mumbai, which country's deadline do you have to follow?
The general rule is actually pretty simple. It's a principle called lex fori, which just means law of the court. Basically, if you sue in an Indian court, you play by Indian rules, specifically India's deadlines. It doesn't matter if the contract was signed in Uganda or on the moon.
But of course there's an exception. It's a really rare one, though. An Indian court will only apply a foreign country's deadline if that foreign law does something much more drastic than just blocking a lawsuit. It has to completely wipe out the legal right itself, like the debt or the obligation never even existed. And this only works if both people were living under that foreign law at the time. It's a very, very high bar to clear.
So when you step back and look at it all, it's clear the Limitation Act isn't just a simple set of deadlines. It's this really sophisticated, complex system. It's constantly trying to strike a delicate balance between getting justice for the vulnerable and the need for everyone to have some legal certainty and closure.
And that really leaves us with one final big question. In this constant search for perfect justice, do all these layers of rules and exceptions to the exceptions make the law more fair or just way more complicated? Where do you draw that perfect line? That's what this explainer leaves us to think about. Thanks for joining me.